investors. We're having a financial analyst meeting, and I have to go over to that. So I read Fred's note on this, and I talked to Steve. And let me just begin by saying there's no right and wrong. I mean, this is a shades of gray. Every day we come in and we make this decision about, what should we do? Is it bad enough that we do something about it? Is this particular security approach going to bear fruit or not? And we've gone down some blind alleys and then done, in my opinion, some really good work. The SDL is really helping us. I think the commitment from management is also helping in the sense that I guess a little bit different than academic. I mean, we can be pretty iron-fisted. I personally can be about, Windows 2003 server is not shipping because IE needs to be revamped and networking needs to be revamped or whatever. But there's no black and white on any of this. So it's a quite difficult question that you're asking. I'm deeply committed to reliability improvements and quality improvements in general. And one thing I will talk to you about, which I think you probably know about, but it might be worthwhile. I personally just didn't think that we were focused on quality enough inside Microsoft for a long period of time, and I'll put security as part of that. So, and in fact, I thought we were slipping down the hill from where we needed to be, and I guess it was now 18 months ago or so, I created this, what I call CAUSD. It's a Core Operating System Division. And I took away all business responsibilities from that team. And that team's mission was to drive up excellence in a variety of different ways. But pretty much you can think about it as engineering excellence. And yes, we'd had trusted computing efforts going on and all the great work that would be done in security. But in terms of across the board, I just didn't think that we were focused hard enough on quality across the discipline, if you will. So taking those responsibilities away, and the core security team actually was part of that group, which I think was premeditated on my part to make sure it was a fundamental part of the engineering excellence. And we took a set of people who were sort of in between what I consider to be pure research and product development. And we moved them into the product team itself, into that core operating group. And that team brought with them the technology that I know you've known about of prefix, prefast, and that sort of work. And that tools organization and that discipline was brought in. I also put that person in charge of pretty much all the core development. And we split up his team where there was tools on one side, but we also focused the more discipline on it. And we went on a campaign I personally did about the set of changes that we're going to make in terms of the way the bills work, that stuff wasn't going to get in the bills. We're going to fix it's all sort of basic stuff. You're going to do it right the first time. You're going to do it early. You're going to find the problems. You're not going to let it leak into the system and clean up the problems later. We are now, after 18 months, I say we've got great fruit of that. This is perhaps the biggest improvement that we have made beyond any of the work in trusted computing, blah, 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 that we have done, in my opinion, because the processes are, at some point, you could say, heavy-handed, but they instill locks on the system. It's great that we're training all the engineers, which we've done, and we've spent a great deal of time training people about how to do it right, and we have the security reviews before products ship and the like. But actually having hard measurables that people can't check code in unless it follows these rules is a huge step forward. So now we have a dependency map, which we never had of Windows. Windows is very complex, as you might expect. And that dependency map wasn't something that a human could do. So we had to use tools to go through and figure out the dependencies, figure out where there were cycles, where it made sense to have the cycles. If not, we were going to break the cycles, but actually put it in a nice layer. So I can't remember the exact number of layers, 55, 56, whatever the layers are. And we understand now where every piece fits in the system. And if you try to check something in that violates that, you're prevented from doing it. So the way we're building Longhorn, or Windows Vista, now is based on the fact that when you check something in, it goes through that dependency check. There's a whole set of other checks. Have you annotated your code with Sal? I think you probably know what that is. Have you done all these checks? If you haven't, you are prevented from checking in. So that discipline actually slowed us down, and there was this is where the management part comes in. I was just basically a jerk and said, I believe long term we will actually get better return from this and do better products and spend less time retrofitting later if you do it right up front. So it was a huge cultural change for the company to go through. And we haven't percolated it through the company. Just through the Windows client and server organizations was the first step. But even before we try to roll it out, other teams have already started picking up those processes, saying, hey, let's try to use these quality gates. How can we use those? So it was a little bit too late to do it fully in what's going on in Visual Studio and Yukon, but they've already started to adopt some of those principles. So I don't see, my point of all this rambling is that I don't see security just as security. I see it part of a whole engineering excellence that Microsoft needed to rise up to the challenge. And those quality gates and what we call the basics cover so many things. Everything that we can measure, we actually prevent from going in the system. Everything we can measure electronically fairly easily, we prevent from going into the system. And then we have a set of basics that across the whole system, people must actually fill out forms on if we can't electronically test it. So for privacy and those sort of things, that they have been through this checklist, and there's checklists for each one of these basic areas across the system. And the basics include everything, there's a plumber that I like, rebooting, performance, privacy, that sort of stuff. And at the end of the day, I mean, you've got features, you've got quality, and you've got date. And you're in a constant balance across all of those. While in order for Vista, quality is number 1, schedule is number 2, and features are number 3. Now, it's not black and white. I mean, even there. I mean, I'd like to make it firm, but it's not, because I want to sell product. So I'm going to make trade-offs here to say that if, for example, and we're having problems with this Lua or, what is it? We came up with another name here. UAP, what is it? User account protection or whatever it is. It's basically just running a standard user. I mean, we've got problems to solve in app compat. So if I was to say, okay, it's quality number 1 and schedule number 2 and features last, I'd throw that feature out. Well, that feature isn't going to get thrown out. I'll blow up the other 2. I'll blow up the schedule before I will let this standard user capability slip out of the system. But we know that we've got hard problems with app compat because we're running the app compat test now, and there are all these apps that are going to have problems, and we're going to have to flesh it out. How many can we shim to get people get by? How can we let individual apps be marked by administrators so that they can't change the app right now, but they can get the app eventually to change over time, but they're not going to stop? If we produce a system that none of the apps run and it has perfect security, we've lost. So it's a complete balance, which I know you guys understand. Yeah?
So yesterday we heard about the red-green business, and it seems there are 2 interesting trade-offs that these guys are looking at. One is the extent to which security per se is made visible to users. That is, how overt is the red and the green color of the window, and how easily do things default from one to the other when they ought to, when, for example, you visit a website that should be green. And the second one, so that's a UI question, and I understand there are strong feelings about not making security that overt. And this not in the group but above the group. And the second is how you do isolation, and the choice there is to try to extend the capabilities of the existing Windows software so it does a better job of doing isolation versus doing some kind of virtual machine hypervisor. There are various versions. And again, I mean, from a pure security point of view, it's clear that, at least to us, I think that the Windows solution is the worst of all the possible ones. So there are two issues. They're trade-off issues. They're different from the Longhorn ones. How do you think that through, and why is there so much pushback to this?
Well, the first comment is isolation is a clear, set of approaches that we are using, whether it be in the network access protection work that we're doing, or whether it be in standard user and low rights IE, which I assume you've heard about. If you okay, so you will see that we are using isolation. I do want to spend a couple minutes on that because it does refer, in my opinion, to the relationship of red-green.
But isolation is good. It's the implementation
that's right. My personal belief is we don't have red-green figured out yet. I don't think we've got it figured out technically, and I don't think we've got it figured out UI-wise. So when you say, is there pushback, the team is moving ahead with that with support of me and me mainly. I think Bill also supports it and is moving ahead. But there are concerns in terms of the user experience that we're creating, and also technically, if you ever contaminate green, you're cooked. And the question is how much are you really isolating things such that you're really helping the situation? I'm not opposed to it. I want us to make progress, but I'm cautious of it because, frankly, virtual machines have been viewed as the answer to many problems. And when you look at them, like they're the answer to app compat. Just do a virtual machine. Okay, well, it's not that easy when you really get into it technically, because do you want 2 start menus? Do you want 2 add programs there? Do you really want to be updating multiple OSs? You still got all the problems of security in the old OSs. How are you going to do that? Do they look like 2 different machines externally to the management software that an enterprise is running, and on and on and on? That's just on the app compat. But it's also sort of true on the red-green. So I just wanted to incubate it a little bit longer before we go and commit that this is the answer, and that we get it out with some trials with customers and see. In terms of the pure attack reduction, or maybe amount of technology it takes in order to implement the isolation, it's clearly better than, if you will, the Windows approach to isolation. But I'm going to actually defend the Windows approach. You guys may tear me to shreds, but I'm still going to do it. So I believe in that. And I want us to make progress, and I want us to test the UI. That we've already learned the things that are, the team is telling me things that don't feel natural to me, and so I definitely want it to be tested. Let me just push on the user interface so you know. It seems, I think, my intuition tells me that having a window there on the screen that is running at a different level, if it's designated appropriately, makes more sense. They say no.
Makes more sense
than switching the entire desktop. Okay? The team says no, switch the whole desktop. Okay? I want that tested. Because
a secure window, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I think what we saw yesterday was there was N options, and I thought they were going to, that was one of the options they
that doesn't work today.
No, we saw N options that they're thinking of exploring, not N options that they're going to make available.
Right. Well, you asked me specifically tied to Longhorn. At least that's how I was hearing the question.
No. So what you should hear is that was a red-green long term. When I sent you this email, red-green was not in my vocabulary,
yes,
so to speak. But now we know about the latest and the greatest in Microsoft, and that was this red-green business. But if you're going to talk about the UI, I think independent of the details about whether it is a window or you're switching the whole desktop, I think a philosophical question is, should users have in their face the fact that there's security and there are two different kinds of windows, two different kinds of interactions, or should we hide as much of this, kind of put it under the covers as much as possible? And I mean, one argument, I mean, the lunatic fringe security version of the argument is the only way we'll get people to pay attention to security is if we make it clear to them that security is around. And if you start hiding it, you're not doing anybody any favors. And this is like, get over it, user community. This is the next step, and it'll become natural once you appreciate it.
Well, again, I don't think there's a black and white response to that, and that to the degree, to get the most people in the universe, you certainly can't have obtuse things. You need to, people do know about some levels of security today. Will they have to learn about others in the future? Unfortunately, my personal belief, they're having to learn way too much today. It's way too confusing. Firewalls, we have all these terms in our vocabulary that consumers have to know now that's mind-blowing. So my dream is to eradicate terminology, but still something may have to pop up at a top level that makes, I don't know. Do you really have to know that?
Anyways, you were talking about these interface stuff, which I don't think anybody here thinks, it's obvious what to do there, and users are going to love it. But you were going to defend Windows isolation.
Yeah, and I'm going to.
Okay.
And some of this will be visible from the low rights IE. First comment, this isn't not an academic discussion in the sense of I'm not going to defend less code is better. Or I'm going to defend less code is better. So let's not have that discussion. Let's just talk about the benefits that you can get through this. So what you're going to see is standard user, we're working on doing that. The idea is by using a technique, we would be able to run a process in a restricted mode so that vulnerabilities inside that particular process cannot leak over. And using the core OS security in terms of what we call integrity level. The benefits of this is that there is no user interface changes at all that are required. The users won't see a difference. Conceptually, when you're in the internet zone, you're running in this limited mode. When you try to, if somebody tries to take advantage of a vulnerability in IE, they can't because there's no place for them to store anything. They can't write to the desktop. They can't do all this. And we virtualize their access to things like cookies and temp files and the like. Yet, when they're accessing an intranet zone or any place that's not on the restricted list or that's been selected as trusted, then they automatically switch processes to another process that's running at a higher, the standard user level. This, from a user experience, is basically no difference. They don't know the difference of how we've engineered it under the covers. We will get mass adoption of this, absolutely mass adoption. So we feel pretty confident that this is a way, without coming up with brand new metaphors, for us to have a different level. Now, will somebody be able to come in and say, oh, there's some code here about the way this process works, and we're going to find some way around it? Well, there is more code than what would be required in a virtual machine. There's no question. But it isn't reams of code because just because of the way it's implemented. And we did part of this implementation SP2. We just didn't complete it. So now we just are finishing the completion. And I'm not going to technically go into the rest of it since you've got a presentation on it in just a minute. But in my opinion, that's also a valid approach for more isolation. And at this point, I don't think there's like one isolation technique. I think the network isolation is one thing we need to do. Surface attack reduction just generally across the system is something we need to do. Standard user is another approach. And this low rights IE, And it doesn't have to be just IE. In Longhorn or in Windows Vista, it's only going to be IE on our current path. I don't think we can get OE done, but that's another one that I would like to do. So I want to defend it in the sense that after you get through seeing it, you'll see that, I don't know if they're actually going to demo it or not. Do you know if they're going to demo it? Okay, so you'll see there's basically no UI difference. You don't know. You are prompted when you're going to do something that would require it, but you won't be surprised. So although we're improving IE in many, many, many ways in Vista, what you won't see is the fact that if there are vulnerabilities in it, you won't just automatically be able to put something on a desktop, write to some registry key, any of that stuff. So, and the way it's implemented is we don't have to spend all our time tackling the heck out of the system. Let's suppose we miss one particular area. We don't have to approach it that way, as you'll see from the way they're talking. So it means it's not where we have to go through the entire system, and if the one leak would sink the ship. It's not done that way. So
I have to summarize what you just said. There was a trade-off between, I'll say user interface or ease of adaptability and the quality of the isolation that's provided. Assurance. I think that the virtual machine approach will have a stronger sense of isolation. I think people here would agree with that. And you just made an argument, which was the way you wanted to make the trade was it was more important to get people to be able to make this move as gracefully as possible than it was to get whatever additional assurance and isolation you get. And we're not quantifying that, but that was essentially the trade you just articulated.
Okay. I have to say that because of less interfaces, less code, I have to agree with you. But let me give you some examples. Let's take, data types seem to be our biggest bane right now. Okay? So I take something in the red machine and I say, I got to have that over in the green machine. And I copy it over to the green machine. Okay? JPEG comes up or X, Y, and Z data type. You're corrupted. Did you really have some deep protection there?
Yeah,
No. No.
That should be. Why not? When you move from
red to whoa. You still have the weakness in the green parser.
Not necessarily, because you pass it to the filter. You have a
So we're going to filter all the data types through this, I don't know what they called it, the airlock or whatever.
Let me give you exactly the same argument for your proposal with the MIC, right?
I know, the same problem exists there. I do know
exactly. And the problem with the MIC is that you are trying to hide the problem. Whenever you have mandatory access controls, and you believe that you can hide that, the fact that the movement between different levels of integrity, you can hide that. This is really, you'll be surprised.
Well, hide it.
Have the same rules for transferring data from one mandatory level to another. The same filtering if you are transferring it in the wrong way. And if you think that you can hide that, then you'll be surprised.
We're not trying to hide it. There actually is a dialogue that comes up, but it's a dialogue they're already used to when they go to save.
Same dialogue could be implemented in words.
No, because what you do is you're dragging something across there, and you're actually...
What do you mean?
Okay,
It's exactly the same dialogue.
No, my argument is that you have a false sense of security with the red-green. That's my argument.
So no, that actually I think
I mean,
no offense
users
intended.
will,
Your argument is that the assertion that virtual machines give better isolation is flawed than the Windows. You just don't believe it's a better isolation because
I believe the
flaw
following. I believe because of less code in red-green, it is better in that regard, no question. But I'm trying to temper your love of this thing in the sense that their core problems in the green get infected with the red much more easily than you may think.
So no, we didn't say it was perfect. We said it was better.
Okay.
And it's not black and white. It's a trade-off. And I think you're making a UI functionality isolation trade-off. And what I don't understand, and I don't know how well you understand it because maybe nobody's pushed into the wall about it, is the extent to which you're making the decision because you have really accurate understanding of both the UI issues and the isolation capability in Windows and in virtual machines. And that is knowing all the nuances of airlocks or the equivalent. Or you're making the decision. So you're either making it because of some coefficients you associate with UI and the value of isolation, or you're making it because you don't have a good understanding of those two things. And
I don't have a good understanding of the virtual machine technique. That is not done. If it was done and it plays out the way we expect, it would be in Vista. I mean, I have no question. It's not done. It needs to get done. I have low rights IE. I know how that's going to help.
But, I mean, my nature is, I like experiments. So I interpreted what you were saying. We're going to try both paths. Mm-hmm. Companies often fight competitions to see, prove who's right. And we'll try this out and see what customers, what vulnerabilities are going to show up, what customers' reactions are going to be. Is that the right way to interpret what you said?
Well, if it's all dependent, you guys can disagree. I can tell you do. But if the UI is not approachable enough in the red-green, its usage will be limited in the marketplace. Obviously, to certain security agencies and the like, they're going to love it. They do love it. And we're going to go ahead and productize that.
So rather than all advertising today is for corporate clients. So it might, if it's not so successful, it'll be and as three-letter agencies will love it, but no corporate clients.
Yeah, see, the team's even backed off from all users because it's
enterprise users.
Enterprise, that's right.
Right. Well, they backed off from all users because there's setup that's required in this. My only point is we don't know yet. Right. We are making progress on it, and I don't even think they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah,
I don't see them that way. I'd like them both to succeed, and I'm just saying.
Simply, if isolation was good enough, you wouldn't need to do that.
That's right. That's right. And as I stand here today, I don't believe it will be.
Yeah, but
both are isolation. If I thought the virtual machine approach was really had all the issues understood. And when I say that, it's not just about security. You've got to update that machine that's in there. You've got to have SMS. How does SMS, relate to it? And you're laughing, but it's a real problem.
Jim, you have a fixed size development budget, and you can either spend, at least I presume.
I'm reminded of that.
You can either throw money at making Windows per se have better isolation. And you have thrown a lot of money at getting Windows better, and you could do that. And by Windows, I mean the operating system. Or you could throw money, not throw that money there, but decide to make a bet on building a good enough prototype of red-green so that when you've got that prototype, if you decide to reject it, nobody will complain that it was rejected because it was under-resourced when it was built, for example. That it was right, and so that's real. I think that's the question. I don't think anybody's saying what should have been in Vista, because the timing isn't an issue. I think the question is whether the red-green that gets built for the near midterm, that is the next strategic level of security, is one that could be based on the best bet at virtual machine style isolation, or the investment should be made in doing it at the level of Windows. And it's a completely orthogonal issue from the user interface thing.
I use the term sledgehammers a lot, and the marketing team, papers me over when I say that. But it is what you're saying. If there is a big approach that can just wipe out a whole set of issues, then I always go for it. And because I don't like this, putting fingers in the dike, if there's a more fundamental approach, I will go for it. Red-green may be it, but there are enough questions in my mind that I don't know yet. Is it staffed enough? I think the staffing on the thing was pulled back a little bit not because of me, but because that team's trying to do Cornerstone, which I'm sure you've heard about, right? Cornerstone?
Secure boot based.
Yeah.
Secure boot.
Encrypted volume. And they want to get that done with the TPM support for
That's a good thing to do.
for Vista. But they're not getting starved from resources from me.
And by the way, it's not red-green that we're talking about. It's the implementation of red-green. And whether you do isolation in Windows or you do it with a virtual machine, they're both red-green in the sense that you've got two sides and you're doing some things in one place and some
Okay,
things
well,
in another.
when the team, I think, talks about it here, they talk about isolation being the concept and red-green being a particular implementation
great.
of virtual machine approach. So I'm,
Then I'll take your comments.
I mean, there are people in the group, you know, as like Butler, who I'm sure will say that red-green is the answer, and I bow to their wisdom of years in this, and you know, and I also say I'm going to wait a little bit and see how it plays out.
Really, I should not respond to that.
Yes. Can I ask, what about, does legacy code matter at all in this discussion, or just isolation is an orthogonal access and you can do it in the operating system, or you can do it VM? And whether it's legacy code or new code really just is irrelevant because we're trying to isolate things.
I think that it's a orthogonal issue, and we have a very serious problem in legacy code. These data type parsers, you know, are something that just this morning I sent a long piece of mail on about how we're going to approach this, because I'm very worried. They're a weak link in our system today, and we've got to go after it better than what we've been doing. Yes, we have fuzzing technology, blah, 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 but it isn't. I mean, we're not on a path to win that battle right now, and I think I'm very worried about it. And I don't know what the computer science approach to this thing is. These fuzzing things just make me, you know, make my skin crawl because it's not architectural. Yeah.
I mean, what's the roadmap for putting managed code in Windows as opposed to things with managed interfaces? Because that would address that problem to some degree. Yeah.
To some degree. To some degree. This is complicated. I'll give you the history of Longhorn in 2 or 3 minutes. We are on a path to use a lot of managed code for the benefits of productivity and also the fact of having somebody else manage the pointers. It's a good thing. We rushed too fast ahead. It was fine for a certain type of apps that happened on the server. It was fine for a certain set of apps that were fairly well constrained within a process. But for doing the operating system, we ran into massive problems, which was part of the complete change that we did last year in saying we cannot depend on those. The problem concerns reliability and serviceability. Those are the two top ones. Performance is also an issue, but the two ones that had me stopped was reliability. When you're in core operating system paths, you need to know if you're out of memory, and you need to be able to recover that path all the way up. They did not write their code that way. So all the starting at the CLR itself, and then going above it to the core of the base framework above that, they just didn't think about that. Hey, you're out of memory? That's too bad, you die. Operating systems can't do this. That was a huge problem. Lots of work was done on that. We thought we were going to be able to push that through. And then we could only go up so far, and then there was so much work in being able to pre-allocate enough memory to ensure you could always recover during the exception paths, and blah, blah, blah. So we had to say, okay, that's a real problem. So it can only be used in limited cases. Certainly when you're in extensions and like you've got managed code extensions, you're plugging into a process, and you can't just blow that process up. If you're in your own process, then you can do other types of recovery for that. But so it had to be used selectively. Then we had the problem of servicing. And servicing is a multi-hour discussion where it took us years to understand how many problems we actually had in servicing managed code. That if you change one piece, how much of the whole system had to be rejigged, and the issues associated with that, and whether or not you could do offline servicing, because our OEMs and corporates want to be able to create huge farms of images and be able to selectively replace stuff. hey, the way this stuff was between all the class libraries. There's no way. In fact, you change the class library to the CLRs to be related to it directly because they've got way too much linkage. There's a whole bunch of learnings about managed code, the concept, writing enterprise line of business applications and maybe consumer apps, and OS system code. It's not ready for OS system code except in specific cases, which we are using in specific cases like in the server. So I made a mandate for any of the certain level in the system from a dependency from this leveling, no managed code beneath there until we work this out. And the managed code team knows these things. They're working on them, but they won't be completed for Would-Be or VS Studio 2005. It won't be completed, so we won't be able to do it. So there's going to be a Longhorn, there's a Longhorn 07, and then there's a Blackcomb. We hope, but I'm not even going to commit today, we hope that we can start on the path for attacking this problem in Blackcomb. Because by then there'll be another version called Orcus out of the Visual Studio team, which will start to attack this thing and make it more applicable for systems programming. We also have performance problems there as well in critical paths. But to me, I'm a believer that the benefits of reliability and other things, had those not been there, that have been worth the additional no buffer overrun issues advantages we could get from that, and the productivity. So that's the gist. We're a ways away from that, except in selected areas. And in selected areas, like on the server, we are using it. And Avalon, for example, Avalon has two pieces today. It has a desktop window manager and a bunch of other components at the very base level. Those were written in unmanaged pieces of code. And then the compositor itself was written in managed code. We scrapped that, did an unmanaged one, but the dream is that maybe in Longhorn 07, we'll see, but we will pull that out and put in the managed piece. Now, why could we do that even on the client? Because it's a single process. It doesn't have any connections into any place else. This thing of versioning was a huge problem. That's all, everything had to be all versioned together. The whole thing just wasn't componentized enough. Anyway, so it took me a few more minutes. Yeah.
Different topic. When you talk about quality and you started up front and you're talking about security, why not say security and privacy as part of what the quality is overall? And how do you, is it just because privacy is a small subset of security, or because out there in the consumer world, the two words are merged together in a sense of, I trust what's going on here, it's merged together. Why say just security? Why not say security and privacy?
I'm just being sloppy. So privacy is actually one of the items in the basics checklist that has to happen for Longhorn. There are specific techniques to deal with security that don't have anything to do with privacy. For example, you'll see in Low-Rights IE, we don't solve privacy at all with what we're doing there. Because an ActiveX control, if it's installed in your system, can read anything that is read-only and can pass up that information. So we're not, but they won't be able to write. So that we've got a security aspect to it. So I do see privacy as very key. We are making progress. One of the things, let me turn this around for just a second. One of the things that would be helpful to me is, I know you're working with Steve and the like, but if you could, maybe at the end of the meetings or maybe semi-annually, write a document, doesn't have to be long, just a few pages, that says, these are the places where I think you need more focus.
They're actually doing.
Okay, I haven't.
Just add to that. Sure.
Okay, fine. I haven't seen that.
Distribution of those. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Because I personally would like to know what you guys think about the areas that we're not paying enough attention. And I don't know what the current feeling is about our privacy work. And I'd be very interested. I'm personally probably more.
You send them old versions.
I think we said under-resourced.
But I need to know in what area. It's such a huge, another huge topic area. To some degree, it's embarrassing, but it's going the way of other past initiatives. We did accessibility. Today, Microsoft is so good at accessibility. We've got to be the same way in privacy. But it took us years to understand what it meant for all the type of extensions that in the system. So I'll let you see the low rights IE, and then you'll decide. Hopefully you get my view. It's not either or. We're going to do isolation. I hope red-green works out to be very broad and applicable. I want more airtime on it. And frankly, we're going to have to even learn about low rights IE. That's not something that's out there today that people are testing, and my hope is that it's going to work out quite well. I'm setting you up here.
Thank
Um,
you.
okay, anything else? Okay, thanks. So you guys are going to send me the document?
Yeah, usually it's been stopping at Mike.